During the Cold War, the Soviet Union's notorious intelligence agency, the KGB, required cars that weren't just fast and discreet. These weren't just vehicles, they were weapons in a shadow war against enemies of the state, specially designed for surveillance, pursuit, and covert operations. Some of these cars looked ordinary, blending into Moscow's chaotic streets, while others were high-powered beasts capable of chasing down defectors and enemy spies. Welcome to Motor Kingdom, where we cover the best stories in the automotive world, on-road, off-road, and under the hood. In this video, we're exploring 10 of the most iconic spy cars used by the KGB, from pre-World War II relics that served Stalin's secret police to Cold War-era legends that roamed the streets of Moscow and beyond. Each car tells a story of power, paranoia, and the lengths the Soviet Union went to control its people and outmaneuver its enemies. First, hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon to stay up to date on all our latest videos. Before the Cold War espionage machines of the KGB, there were the crude yet essential vehicles of Stalin's secret police. In the 1930s and 40s, Soviet intelligence relied on early models, often slow, unreliable, or even repurposed from captured foreign stock. Yet these vehicles laid the foundation for what would later become a fleet of purpose-built spy cars. At first glance, the Gaz-A looked like a symbol of progress, a Soviet car for a modernizing nation. But underneath its simple design, this vehicle played a darker role in the hands of the NKVD, the predecessor of the KGB. Based on the American Ford Model A, the Gaz-A was the Soviet Union's first mass-produced passenger car, boasting a 40-horsepower engine and a 90 km per hour or 56 miles per hour top speed. For Soviet secret police, the Gaz-A was a tool for surveillance and transportation of suspects. However, it was far from ideal. Its wooden spoke wheels and fragile construction made it unreliable on harsh Russian roads. Worse yet, it was underpowered, often failing to keep up with suspects or quickly transport agents to critical locations. Despite these flaws, the Gaz-A marked the beginning of Soviet intelligence vehicles. If the Gaz-A was a crude beginning, the Gaz-M1 was a refined but terrifying upgrade. Nicknamed the MK, this 50-horsepower sedan became infamous during Stalin's Great Purge. Secret police units used it to transport political prisoners to interrogation sites or worse. Seeing a black Gaz-M1 pulling up in the middle of the night often meant someone would disappear, never to be seen again. While it was more durable than its predecessor, the Gaz-M1 still suffered from mechanical failures, particularly on long-distance missions. Yet its slightly more powerful engine and sturdier frame made it a staple for NKVD operations well into World War II. In the aftermath of World War II, Soviet intelligence possessed a strange mix of foreign vehicles, some from the defeated Germans, others supplied by the Americans under the Lend-Lease program. Among them were the Opel Kapitan, Mercedes-Benz 170V, and Studebaker US-6 trucks. These vehicles were a double-edged sword. On one hand, they were significantly faster, more reliable, and more advanced than Soviet-made cars at the time. On the other hand, they stood out like a sore thumb. A Western-made vehicle driving through Moscow was an instant giveaway, making surveillance missions difficult. Despite their limitations, these cars were essential for Soviet intelligence in the late 1940s, buying time until the USSR could develop more advanced, purpose-built KGB vehicles. With the Cold War intensifying, the KGB needed cars that could blend into Soviet streets while delivering the speed, durability, and discretion required for high-stakes espionage. This led to the next generation of KGB vehicles, which were more advanced and dangerous and explicitly designed for the world of spies. The KGB needed cars to keep up with high-stakes espionage demands as the Cold War heated up. They needed speed, discretion, and reliability, all in a package that wouldn't draw attention. And that's where the Volga came in. Over the years, this seemingly ordinary Soviet sedan evolved into a silent enforcer of state power, hiding powerful engines and top-secret modifications beneath its unassuming frame. At first glance, the Gaz-M20 Pobeda looked like any Soviet family car. It was practical, sturdy, and blended seamlessly into Moscow's traffic. But the M20G, a special version built for the KGB, was anything but ordinary. This modified Pobeda had a more powerful engine than a civilian model, giving it the speed needed to follow Western diplomats and suspected dissidents. While most Soviet cars at the time were painfully slow, the M20G gave the KGB a rare advantage: the ability to shadow targets without being left in the dust. It was far from perfect, though. Despite its improved engine, it still struggled to match the performance of foreign vehicles, making high-speed chases a risky endeavor. But in Cold War espionage, subtlety often mattered more than raw speed. The M20G wasn't built to chase, but to watch, follow, and report back. If the Pobeda was a cautious observer, the Gaz-23 Volga was a predator. On the surface, it looked like an ordinary Volga, a common sight among Soviet bureaucrats and government officials. But hidden beneath its mild-mannered exterior was a 160-horsepower V8 engine, taken straight from the luxurious Gaz Chaika limousine. This car was built for speed. It could go from 0 to 100 kilometers in 16 seconds, an impressive feat for a Soviet sedan at the time. With a top speed of 160 kilometers per hour or 99 miles per hour, it could outrun almost anything on Russian roads. And that's precisely what it was designed to do. The KGB used the Gaz-23 for some of its most critical operations. It was perfect for intercepting defectors, responding to emergencies, and monitoring high-priority targets. It was so effective that it was never made available to civilians. If you saw a Volga speeding past you with no license plates, chances were you were looking at a KGB car on a mission. By the late 1960s, espionage had become more intense than ever. Foreign intelligence agencies had access to increasingly fast and sophisticated cars, and the KGB needed to keep up. Enter the Gaz-24 Volga, a beast disguised as a family sedan. This car packed a 195 horsepower V8 engine capable of hitting 190 kilometers per hour or 118 miles per hour. To put that into perspective, this car could outrun many Western police cruisers of the time. It wasn't just fast, it was built for action. It had a reinforced chassis to handle high-speed maneuvers, an automatic transmission for seamless acceleration, and even an electromagnetic trunk lock, allowing agents to store weapons, surveillance gear, or captured suspects securely. The car became infamous among Soviet dissidents. A black Volga lurking outside your apartment or tailing you through the streets of Moscow was never a good sign. Many believe these cars were used in kidnappings, with people being grabbed off the street and thrown into the trunk, never to be seen again. Whether that was an urban legend or not, the fear was real, and the KGB knew it. While most KGB cars were used for spying and pursuit, some had a different mission: protecting the Soviet elite. That's where the Gaz-24 came in. Designed specifically for the 9th Directorate, the unit responsible for guarding high-ranking officials, this version of the Volga was built with security in mind. Unlike its predecessors, the Gaz-24 came equipped with encrypted radio systems, allowing agents to communicate securely, even during a crisis. It also had a reinforced suspension, ensuring a smoother ride even on rough roads or during emergency evasive maneuvers. However, the most interesting feature was its fuel tank, which could only be accessed through the trunk to prevent damage. In an era of Cold War paranoia, even something as simple as a fuel cap could be a security risk. These cars were often seen escorting Soviet leaders, forming part of the convoys that transported high-profile officials through Moscow. If you ever saw a fleet of Volgas surrounding a black Chaika limousine, you could be sure that someone important was inside. By the 1980s, KGB cars had transformed from unreliable old machines into high-performance, high-security espionage tools. They weren't just cars anymore. They were weapons in a silent war fought on the streets of the Soviet Union. Some were built for chasing spies, others for watching without being seen, and some for protecting the most influential people in the country. But as the Cold War neared its final years, the KGB needed even more advanced machines, armored limousines, experimental surveillance cars, and vehicles designed for a world teetering on the brink of collapse. The KGB's need for high-performance vehicles grew as the Cold War entered its final decade. The world of espionage was evolving, and so were the threats. The agency required cars that could keep up with increasingly sophisticated Western intelligence services while maintaining the secrecy and control the Soviet government demanded. The final generation of KGB cars reflected this shift faster, safer, and more discreet than ever before. But they also marked the end of an era. By the early 1980s, the Soviet government realized that the outdated Gaz-24 Volga was no longer cutting it. They needed something more refined, a car that combined security, performance, and a touch of prestige. Enter the Gaz-3102, a car designed not just for KGB operatives, but also for the Soviet elite. At first glance, it looked similar to the old Volga models, but it was an entirely new machine under the hood. It featured disc brakes, a rare luxury in Soviet cars, significantly improving stopping power. It also introduced crumple zones, a significant advancement in Soviet automotive safety, designed to absorb impact in case of a crash. The fuel tank was relocated to a safer position, preventing sabotage or accidental explosions, an ever-present concern for high-ranking officials. These upgrades made the Gaz-3102 the car of choice for KGB officers, Politburo members, and other key Soviet figures. Unlike previous generations, which were mostly modified versions of civilian vehicles, the Gaz-3102 is built from the ground up with intelligence work and security in mind. This all made the vehicle into a status symbol. If you'd seen one of these on the streets of Moscow in the 1980s, chances were that someone important was inside. If the Gaz-3102 was the luxury cruiser, the Gaz-31012 was its high-speed enforcer. Outwardly, it looked just like any other Volga, practical Soviet sedan, nothing more. But that was precisely the point. Beneath its hood was a 5.5-liter V8 engine taken straight from the massive Gaz-14 Chaika limousine. This transformed the 31012 into one of the fastest Soviet sedans of its time, making it the perfect vehicle for counterintelligence operations. The KGB relied on these cars for missions requiring stealth and speed. Unlike their previous high-performance Volgas, which had become notorious for their aggressive looks and license plate-free exteriors, the 31012 blended into traffic effortlessly. It allowed agents to tail foreign diplomats or suspected spies without drawing attention, while still having the power to engage in high-speed pursuits when necessary. But this car wasn't just used within the USSR, it was also deployed abroad to protect Soviet assets in foreign countries. Intelligence officers stationed in embassies and covert operatives working in hostile environments relied on these chasers for both offense and escape. The car represented the last evolution of the Soviet-style sleeper agent vehicle, hiding its true power until it was most needed. As the Soviet Union began to crumble, the KGB introduced one last high-performance sedan, the Gaz-31013. This was their final attempt at creating the ultimate surveillance vehicle that could keep up with the latest Western intelligence advancements while remaining entirely inconspicuous. The 31013 was fitted with advanced radio equipment, allowing KGB agents to monitor communications and coordinate operations in real time. It also came with a turbocharged engine, giving it the acceleration needed for urban surveillance missions. This car was designed to blend into the cityscape, following targets without being noticed and slipping through traffic undetected. Despite its cutting-edge modifications, the Gaz-31013 was the last of its kind. By the early 1990s, the Soviet Union was collapsing. The KGB, once the most feared intelligence agency in the world, was being dismantled. As the new Russian Federation took shape, many of these once powerful vehicles were phased out and replaced by imports like Mercedes-Benz. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the era of the KGB spy car ended abruptly. These once dominant vehicles, built to chase spies, protect leaders, and uphold state control, were now relics of a vanished empire. Many were scrapped, while others ended up in private collections, their sinister pasts forever tied to the Cold War's most secretive operations. But the legacy of these vehicles lives on. Today, the Volga name still carries an air of mystery and authority, a reminder of a time when the streets of Moscow were filled with unmarked black sedans, their drivers watching, waiting, and ensuring that no one escaped the grip of the Soviet state. With the KGB's cars now history, one question remains. If the Cold War had never ended, what kind of spy cars would they be driving today? Though the Soviet Union has long since collapsed, the legacy of KGB cars lives on, both in the hands of collectors and in popular culture. What were once tools of surveillance and repression have now become prized relics of a bygone era, symbols of both Soviet ingenuity and Cold War paranoia. Recently, a collector's craze has emerged around these vehicles, particularly models like the Gaz-2424 and other modified Volgas. Restored versions, such as the 99.9% authentic rebuilds by Autoklassika, are highly sought after by enthusiasts who appreciate the engineering and the history behind them. These once feared black sedans, which used to instill terror in Soviet citizens, are now proudly displayed at car shows, museums, and even private collections. Beyond the collector's market, KGB cars have also left their mark on film and television. Shows like The Americans and movies like Bridge of Spies have helped cement their image as Cold War icons. Whether it's a Volga lurking outside a dissident's apartment or a high-speed chase through Moscow streets, these cars symbolize the era's tense and secretive world of espionage. Meanwhile, Russia's modern intelligence agency, the FSB, has moved on to using armored BMWs, Audis, and Mercedes-Benzes, a stark contrast to the raw Soviet-built machines of the past. Yet despite this transition, KGB-era cars remain symbols of Soviet power and engineering, representing both the ambition and the authoritarian control that defined the USSR. From the simple Gaz-A of the 1930s to the high-speed Gaz-31013 of the 1980s, KGB cars were more than just vehicles. They were extensions of Soviet power. Each model was designed to serve a specific role in the state's vast intelligence apparatus. Whether it was tailing Western diplomats, transporting political prisoners, or protecting Soviet leaders from unseen threats. These cars tell a deeper story about the USSR, a nation that prided itself on engineering and innovation but was equally defined by secrecy, surveillance, and control. They were not just modes of transportation, they were tools of a system built to maintain power at all costs. And while the KGB is long gone, its legacy and the legacy of its cars still lingers in the shadows of history. If If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories of forgotten machines of the past. We'll see you in the next video.